My name is Leila Mandel, actually Leila Cardoso Mandel, and I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on November 20th, 1950. My first memory is the smell of my baby bottle milk. I never forgot that. I took the bottle until I was 3 years old. That's why I still remember it. 3 or 4. I mean, I just didn't want to let go of it, you know. Shame on me. What are we going to do with all this laughter and stuff like that? So I was the firstborn child. And of course, I lived with my parents in a low middle class neighborhood in Rio. And my father was Álvaro Cardoso, and my mother's name is Leila Mussi Cardoso. We lived in a townhouse, townhome, but very tiny, a one-bedroom townhouse. And like I said, I was the first born, and my brother Sergio, he was born 5 years after me. So, and it was just the two of us. My father worked at an accounting firm. He was not the owner. He was first an employee, then he became a partner in a tiny little accounting firm, just the two of them, just the two partners. So he went to his office every day, came back to have lunch at home every day from downtown, took the bus, came home, had lunch, went back to work again, and then came back around 7 p.m. And we had dinner together. I remember one of my most important memories of my father was that as soon as he showed up at the gate of it was not a street, it was a closed street with 7 townhouses. Okay, so it had a gate at the end. So it was the townhouses were all together. They have common walls, 1 to 7, number 1 to number 7. We lived on number 6. And so there was a lot of space for the kids to play right in front of our houses. It was heaven. Okay, because we went to school in the morning or in the afternoon. In Brazil, school was only half time. Okay, like you went at 7:30 in the morning and you came back at 12:30. So it's like around 5 hours. So you either went in the morning or in the afternoon. And then you came home and you had to do homework. And then you had the rest of the day to ride your bike right in front of your house or play ball, and the boys played soccer and the girls played, all kinds of little games, group games. So it was the center of the neighborhood kids where I lived. So I could not have a more happy childhood. I couldn't. I'm extremely fortunate about that. Extremely fortunate. And we still talk about it, me and my neighbors from that time. That was 1950, okay, when I was born there. Right now, I have a WhatsApp group with my neighbors from when I lived in that group of townhomes. It's called a villa in Brazil. So I talk to them almost every day, my neighbors. It's just joy, you know. Um, so my father went to work at his office downtown, but when he came home, either for lunch or for, at the end of the day, my brother and I would run from house number 6 all the way to the gate to hug him, and he would pick us both up on his arms and carry us to the home again until I got a little too big to be picked up. But that was that was my father. I mean, I just there was so much love in that house. It's just amazing. I had a very, very happy childhood.
And what about your mother? What was she doing?
Yes, my mother was not from Rio. My father was from Rio, but my mother was born in the interior of Brazil. I mean, in the country, he's in another state. And so she grew up in a farm. Her father owned the farm, and they had a large family. Her father and her mother had 12 children. And it was like a rural existence. They went to school just for, elementary school, and did not continue because they had to help out at the house, to help with the little children, the brothers and sisters, because my mother was one of the oldest. She was the third oldest. So she had to take care of the babies that were still being born. And so that's how she grew up. But suddenly her life changed completely because my grandfather started having problems with money, and he was from Beirut, Lebanon. Lebanon didn't exist yet, so he was Syrian. Um, and he came to Brazil to make a living. A lot of Syrians did at that time. So there's a large community of Syrian-Lebanese immigrants in Rio and in São Paulo and large cities in Brazil. And so he went to Minas Gerais, which I don't know why he went to Minas Gerais, but I believe he might have had some cousins that had already come to Brazil before him. And then they kept on coming. Other cousins came later on, and he helped them get started, in buying property and things like that. But what happened is that he helped them, but then they never returned. They never paid him back for the money he lent them. So with 12 children and just with the farm, they started having, money problems. There's not enough money to survive. And so he actually, he committed suicide. My grandfather, my mother's father. And I learned that after I was an adult. Nobody talked about that. So that's a very sad story. And so my grandmother, who was much younger than him, my grandmother got married at 14 years old, I think. She's extremely, she was a baby.
Mhm.
They got married, and he was like 10 or 12 years older than she was. And then she had all these children, and she had to move to the big city so that they had a way of survive. Otherwise they would just not be able to make it. So it's a sad story. My mother's family went through very hard times. My parents met in Rio de Janeiro. My father was born there and lived there, and my mother came from Minas Gerais with the rest of her family and her mother after her father died, and they had to live in a tenement, a tiny little place until, the oldest girls got jobs at a hat factory. The oldest sister had gotten married already, so had a husband and lived in Rio with her husband and her children. I don't know much about my father's background because on his birth certificate, there's only his mother's name. His father did not recognize him as a son. His father, as I understand, and I'm trying to figure more out as I get older from my cousins, etc. But it looks like he had two families. One, the married, the official one, and the other one that was, and he had the four children in the second family and did not recognize any of them. So none of them has my grandfather's name. So I actually didn't know what my father's name was until like a couple of years ago. My grandfather, I know that he was from Portugal. My brother found just one consulate, Portuguese consulate card registration with his picture and his ID, where he was born in Portugal and his year of birth. But I only got that like 2 or 3 years ago, very recently. So now I am trying to pursue our genealogical tree, complete it, just to inform my sons of who their great grandparent was, great grandfather was. Mhm.
But you had a whole bunch of cousins, it seems.
I have a lot of cousins because my mother's family was so large, and they all went to Rio, so they all lived kind of close together. So every time there was a birthday, or a holiday or something, we did get together. My mother and her sisters were very, very close. They really supported each other all the time, including in terms of money, you know. So it was a very close family, and I love them, and I try to keep in touch with them still. Last year, I went to Brazil, and we had a reunion still with my cousins, and some of them, with the oldest one of my cousins on my mother's side, his name is Alvaro, and he's turning 97 today. And I met him when I went to Brazil last year. Yeah, because I really wanted to see him. Well, a day in my life was very basic and very regular. So, like I said, I went to school when I was, a child. I went to elementary school in the morning for like 5 hours. My father or my mother would take me and pick me up. We did not have a car or anything like that. But the transportation was either by streetcar or by bus. But it was in the same neighborhood, so it wasn't not a long trip. It was like 15 minutes at the most. So we went to school in the morning. When I came back, I had lunch with my father, who came from his office to have lunch at home every day, which my mother cooked every day. So while I was at school and my father was at work, my mother she was a housewife, and she had to, she didn't, she, to her, work was a major burden, because she had to work when she was young to help the family. So she knew what making a living was. And she was happy to have a home and a husband and children now, after. And she actually waited 10 years to get married. My mother and my father, they met 10 years before they got married. They met in Botafogo, and my father wanted to marry my mother when they met. But my mother could not do that because she had to work at the factory, the hat factory, to help with the family, help them with money. So they only got married 10 years after that, and she was already 31 when she got married. Yes. So I know next to nothing about my father's childhood because of this situation that his father was absent, and he only grew up with his mother and his three sisters. And I don't know where they lived. I don't know anything about that. So I don't even know his address. I'm trying to really discover more about him. But it's hard because I have only one cousin left from my father's family, and he insists that he knows nothing about the family. And I keep insisting because he has to know something. I know that he does, but he doesn't want to give the information. It's the skeletons in the closet, Yeah.
Let me get back to your life. And are there characters that featured into it? I want to know what formed you and what influenced you.
Yes, my neighbors had a great influence on me. And because there was 6 more houses next to mine, There were the girls my age, My best friend her name is Fatima. She was a daughter of a Portuguese couple, and she lived on house number 2, and I lived on house number 6. And she's 3 years older than me. I talked to her yesterday by cell phone. So she's like my sister. I never had a sister. So Fatima, for me, my neighbor, she was like my sister. We didn't go to school together because she was older, so she was ahead of me in school. So that's who I played with all of the time, all day long. Okay, we were like, attached. Yeah, Fatima, and there were more. There were other girls, but she was the closest one to me. I had another neighbor who was a major influence on me, who was next door to me, house number 7. Her name is Zilda Salvador, and her mother was from Slovenia. And her aunt, her mother's sister, lived with them because she was single. Zilda was a reader. She bought books like, all day, every day. And she shared her books with me. Of course, she was 20 years older than me. She was an adult. but she was not married, so she didn't have children, and she just adopted me. She's like she was my godmother, you know. She was an adorable person. And what she taught me was the love of books. She had a subscription to the Reader's Guide in Portuguese. So she got that little magazine every month or every week, I don't know. And I was like 3 or 4 years old and I didn't read yet, but I would just scan that magazine and look at the pictures, you know, and be sitting there. And she was so surprised and so happy that I enjoyed the Reader's Guide, even though I didn't even read. So I almost practically learned to read before I went to school. It was very easy for me to learn to read. And I remember the name of my first teacher, Miss Berenice. And she was the person who was my first teacher and helped me with reading and stuff. And she was so proud of me because I always got medals from school for first place. You know, I have bunches of medals, including gold medals. They actually it was you know, covered with gold. It's like a gold star at the Olympics. You know, I was the best student at my elementary school, and so I always remember that. Oh yes, I always loved to study. You know, I love to study, do my homework. So I came home at noon from school, and I would have lunch and do my homework first of all in the dining room because my house had just 3 rooms, living, dining room, and one bedroom where my parents slept. And for a while, two more people lived in our house. Not all the time, but on and off. It was the two single sisters of my father and my mother, one of each side. So they had single sisters who didn't have a place to live, so they had to live with us. So there were 3 sofa beds in the living room, one for me, one for each of my aunts. That's how it was. And that because there were 7 houses just like that, I thought everybody lived like that, you know. I never had a bedroom of my own until this house here. But so that, you know, like I said, my family did not have a lot of money, that's for sure, but they had a lot of, they did their best and they were able my father was able to provide for us. We never were hungry or anything
Yeah.
like that. And clothes, we had shoes to wear. So that villa with the 7 houses were, you know, like an extended family. And we celebrated holidays. We celebrated Brazil's winning of 3 World Cups there. And you should see the party after the games, the soccer games, you know. Soccer is a big thing in Brazil. And soccer was a very big part of my family life. So on the weekends, my family would do this. First, go to the church on Sunday and early, you know, 8 o'clock in the morning. After that, we would go to the beach between like 9 o'clock and noon. We would go all together to the beach, and all the neighbors and all the dogs. It was a party. I mean, we were always together, you know. My neighbor, my best friend, would go to the church with me, would go to the beach with me, you know. And then in the afternoon, we would go to watch the soccer game at the stadium in our neighborhood. And there was a local team called Botafogo, which means put on fire, Botafogo. and and I'm still watching the games. Yesterday, I watched the Botafogo game on my TV, and they won 4-1. Yay! So that's part of my life. That's so part of me. Okay, the beach and the soccer. The church is no longer part of my life because after I moved out of Brazil, I had already been distant from the church. I studied too much and learned too much, and I couldn't do it anymore. Too many questions, too many. No, no, it can't be like that. So that was a breakup, a definite breakup. But after soccer, we would go home, shower, and go back to Botafogo for the dance, for the Sunday dance. And my father and my mother would go, and my aunts and my brother and the whole family would go to dance because they loved to dance. And that's why I love to dance too. And we're crazy about music. Two of my uncles were musicians. They both played the guitar, and one played a small guitar like a ukulele, but a little bit. No, it's not exactly a ukulele, but it's something similar. And they composed, and they lived off of music, which is amazing. And my brother actually also learned how to play the guitar, and I did too. My uncle taught me when I was like 14, 15. I I was able to play quite a few bossa nova songs on my guitar and sing. I was too fortunate. How come I had such a perfect life. And my mother suffered so much, and my brother has a miserable life now, and I don't. It's like, why? It's one of the things that I don't know, the mysteries of life that I don't understand.
So let's go back to the timeline of your life.
Timeline, yeah. When I was 5 years old, I got a little brother. His name is Sergio, and he lived in that place too until my father was able to buy an apartment. And so we were happy. I was 17 or 18. I can't remember moving out of that place. It totally erased from my memory when we left that place, and moved to an apartment with 2 bedrooms there. Where me and my brother at least had a bedroom separate. So my brother, going back to the villa, he did the same. His life was the same as mine. I mean, school in the morning and soccer and fly kites right there at my house. And of course they fell on somebody else's roof, and then he had to go pick it up, and then they fought for kites and things like that. And he made kites and sold kites so that he could have a little pocket money. And of course he cheered for Botafogo as well. And and he would go to the beach and ride. We rode our bikes all the time. That's what I did the most in my life, was ride bikes around the block. Totally safe. My mother didn't know where I was or where my brother was. We were just out. We were completely free in 1950s. It's like it was like ideal place to grow up. Everybody knew everybody, and there was no traffic almost. People didn't have cars over there, so many cars like now. So our neighborhood was perfect to live. We would walk everywhere, like to buy bread, to buy to go to the pharmacy. It was just at the corner. I mean, it's just in one block. Everything we needed was right there, except for school. Yeah, that's the only thing that wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it was ideal. It was ideal. We still wonder and talk about it all the time. How much fun we had and how free we were, especially. Freedom. It's what children don't have anymore. They can't get out of their boxes, you know. They may live in a
Yeah.
wonderful apartments and have pools, but they don't have the freedom.
So back to your own life and going forward in time.
Moving out of the villa into the apartment coincided with my going to college. My college was a federal university. We had to I had to pass the SATs kind of thing in Brazil, a big exam, and I got fifth place on the exam, and I was able to go to a university that was there was no tuition because it was a federal university. That's the major advantage of being in Brazil is they don't have to pay for college. If you can make a good place well into the when you do the entrance exam.
Did you have to specialize at that point? Did you say you wanted to choose
Yes,
this or that?
yes, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. That's the problem. I knew I loved the languages, English and French. Actually, I studied at the Alliance Française for 6 years on the side, because I loved French so much because of my next door neighbor who loved French and she taught French. She was a tutor. And I caught her love of French. And so college was in the same neighborhood. It was not in the exact same neighborhood, but it's very close. It's like 20 minutes from my house. It just happened to be, over there. So we would go, it would almost the same routine going to college, to my college class. And in the morning, it was also half day. It's just like it was the elementary and secondary school. And then I started looking for jobs for me to work in the afternoon to make some money. My first job was at a bank where a cousin of my mother's, yeah, my second cousin, worked at a bank, and he said, "Oh, we were interviewing for can she type?" I said, "Yeah," because I had taken classes, typing class, and so I took the test, and he gave me a job as like a cashier at the bank, like a receptionist over there. So I love to make my own money. That was one thing that I was very, very intent on doing all the time. Even before I got this first job, which was an official job, I used to like sell candy that my aunt made to make money, and she made some very special and delicious coconut candy that nobody could refuse. And the girls and the people in school, the other students loved it. So once every other week, I brought tons of kilos of candy to sell. And everybody got so mad at me because they were very fattening, but nobody could resist them because they just melt in your mouth. So I made money with that for my clothes and things like that. I always had this desire to make my own money. No, I didn't miss anything, in life, but I wanted to have my money. I think that it was very strong to me as I grew older. Was I was very very feminist. When my father came home for lunch, and he never cleared his plate. We had to I had to clear the plate for everybody, and then I was wondering, why can't my father clear his plate, take the plate to the kitchen, which is like 4 steps. I was very I noticed these things, the differences between, man's life and women's life. But my mother, made all the cooking. She didn't have any help. I mean, she had help because of the two sisters, my two aunts that lived with us. They helped her, okay, because they lived there and they were part of the family, so they were. So I didn't have anything to do except for, I mean, I had cleaned up a little bit and stuff. Chores. I'm talking about chores. I didn't want to learn how to cook because my aunts cooked amazingly well. So everything I made could not possibly get to that level. So I didn't want, and I didn't really want. I'd much rather read than cook and clean and stuff like that. Um, but before, I had to do two exams, pre-college exams, because I couldn't decide if I wanted to study languages, French and English and things like that, or if I wanted to, or what else I wanted to do. So I did a vocational testing in high school, and they said, you can do whatever you want. You have, well, thank you very much. I don't know what I want. I don't know. I couldn't decide. So I ended up taking psychology. I was interested in psychology. It was interesting. So, but that was a mistake. I mean, I never really. I mean, I was a good student as usual, but I was never very secure of what I was doing. I was never. It was hard for me. I didn't really want it. I felt very insecure. I wanted to treat myself. I wanted to do therapy. That I did because you were kind of forced to do it when you go to psychology school. So as I was studying psychology, I did join a group therapy, and that was great. That was very good for myself. That's what I wanted. I wanted to be a patient, not a psychologist. One thing during college that I did was get a boyfriend. So for the 4 years of college, I had one boyfriend who studied in the same place that I did. And he was from Bolivia. And it was interesting, but it ended. I mean, yeah. But it lasted a long time. 4 years is a long time. But I found out that he was not, I couldn't trust him. So yeah, he got other girlfriends, where he worked and stuff like that. People would tell me things because we were well known because we were one of the few couples in boyfriend girlfriend couples in school. So it ended not good. Yeah, it ended. Period. I mean, we were too young anyway, so. I was going to be together, but not really.
Must have hurt your feelings, though.
Oh yeah, that was tough. That was tough, but I was so. He sent many signals, So I started collecting the signals, and then I finally put it all together, and I say, okay, that's it. Then that's the end. I don't look back anymore. I never look back. So I went to college for 5 years because that's how long you have to go to become a clinical psychologist in Brazil. And I started looking for jobs, and I worked at a school doing vocational testing, and I worked at the library at my school too. I always loved to work at libraries. Well, after that, I graduated, and then I got a real job at a Child Welfare Foundation. Okay, and that's when I met Moisés in 1975. Yeah, I graduated from psychology school in 1973, and I worked for a couple of years, and I met Moisés as I was working at this child welfare foundation. I have to smile because it's a crazy story of how I met my husband. I my boyfriend and I had broken up, so I didn't. I was free. And one day I went to the movies with a psychologist, a friend of mine who worked with me at another place. And there was a festival, a French movie festival at the theater close to her house. And we went to see Alphaville. And so we went into the movie theater. It was completely full. So I sat down, and Moisés sat right next to me at the theater. And then I was wearing a poncho from Bolivia that my previous boyfriend had given to me. That poncho called a lot of attention, because it was very furry, And then he looked at me. We never seen each other in our lives. So Moisés looked at me, and he looked at the poncho and he asked me, "Doesn't this give you an allergy?" I looked at him and said, "No, it doesn't. If you do have allergies, you can move." That's how I met him. Okay, that's how it started. That's how it started. We sat next to each other at a movie theater out of the blue, and he asked me that question. And from then on, we started fighting already until the rest of our lives. But we all also, had some good times. But we're just like we're always, he was. I said that was very fresh of him, don't you think? He actually pulled the fibers of my alpaca poncho, and he asked if I wasn't going to be allergic to that. That's how it started. I said, "You can move to another chair, because he's going to be sneezing all night long because of my poncho. You can just look for another seat." That's what I said to him. He was fresh, so I was fresh too. But the truth is, there was no other seat. The movie was full. Yeah. He wasn't allergic. He was just trying to talk to me. Actually, he said it was interested in my friend. She was very beautiful. The friend, her name was Virginia, and so he started talking to me, and he kept on talking. He talked all through the movie. It was just a pain in the neck, talk, 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 talk. And I said, "Oh my gosh." I don't remember hardly anything about the movie. At the end of the movie, this is important because I was leaving, so okay, that's the end. Virginia, who was with me, said, "Invite your friends to go have an orange juice with us at the bar next door." I said, "I'm not going to do that. He's a pain in the neck." But she did. She did. She invited him, it's her fault that I met Moisés, that I stayed with Moisés, because if it wasn't for me, I wouldn't have never done that. I'm not that kind of, I didn't do that kind of thing. I'm an extremely traditional person. So we went and had an orange juice, and they found out that both of them, Virginia and Moisés, had the tickets to leave Brazil already. Moisés was going to Canada in 3 months, 3 months from that day. It was July. He would leave in November, so 4 months or so. And Virginia was going to the United States to get married. So they said, we had a nice conversation, after the movie. And anyways, that's how it started. Yeah, so after the orange juice, we talked a lot about leaving Brazil. I was interested in leaving Brazil too. and study more and get a graduate studies in France. And then we exchanged phone numbers. And then the next day he called me, and then we became friends. And that's how we made contact. It wouldn't happen if it wasn't for my friend Virginia, who still lives in the United States, and now we can visit each other. Okay. So we became friends, and then we started dating and seeing each other. But I knew that he was leaving Brazil in 3 months, so I didn't have any plans for anything. I was just going out. But Moisés was leaving in November, and he went to Israel to visit his parents who were living there at the time. So he didn't have his immediate family was not in Brazil anymore. His parents and his younger brother were in Israel, and his older brother was in the United States already, who was a physician, doing the same thing as Moisés was going to do, which is get his anesthesiology residence. And then, so we separated, and then I applied for graduate studies in Belgium, Louvain, Catholic University of Louvain. Because I had a friend who was from Belgium, and his mother helped me prepare the application because I learned that it was easier to get yourself to Belgium than to get yourself to Paris to study, because there's much less competition. So I did that, and I went to Belgium in 76. Moisés left in 75. I left in 76, less than a year later. And I lived in Belgium. I studied there for a year. And then we got to write to each other again, Moisés and I. We had thought of getting married before that, but we couldn't make a decision because we had seen each other it was too short a time that we had known each other, like 3, 4 months, And I wasn't sure I wanted to get married and live in Canada, but I was considering that.
Was there a problem with the fact that he was Jewish and your family was Catholic?
Not at all. Yeah. So Moisés was from a Jewish family, and I'm from a Catholic family. Although I was already very, distant from the church. I didn't attend church anymore or even believe in God anymore. And he was about the same thing. He just was always arguing over that with his family. So when Moisés went to visit his family in Israel, it was clear to him that his family was not well. His mother was absolutely miserable because she didn't speak Hebrew and she didn't know anybody there. She missed her sisters who lived in Rio, and she always relied on them for everything. Moisés' younger brother was 12 years old, Jaime, and his father put him in yeshiva, the Hebrew school that prepares boys to be religious or even rabbis, And Jaime was not used to that either. He used to go to a regular school in Rio. And so he was miserable. The mother was miserable, and she wanted to go back to Brazil because she would never see her husband. He got a job at the telephone company as he had been promised, and he was very happy to have a job. And then after the job, he went to Shul. He went to the synagogue where he's a Lubavitcher, and that's where he lived, and that's where he loved to be there. He ate there. So he just his wife was absolutely by herself at the apartment. And she was miserable. She didn't adapt at all to Israel. She did not. She really missed. So Moisés called his older brother in the States, and they had a group conversation. And his mother was really adamant that she wanted to go back to Brazil because she couldn't, she was depressed as she could be. So Moisés and Samuel, his older brother, decided, well, if you want to go back to Brazil, the two of us will support you. You can do it. So Moisés stayed there for longer than he should have, actually got a job at Hadassah Hospital. And then he sent me a telegram saying that he was going to stay longer in Israel. And I said, okay, he got a job in Israel? Oh, okay. So the plans have changed. He's going to stay in Israel. I'm going to go to, I was still in Brazil when he decided to stay in Israel. So that's when I decided to go to Belgium to apply for a way to get out of Brazil as well. So I applied for the scholarship in Belgium, and I started there in August 1976. Yeah. It's a very long story.
Yeah. Anyway, you're in Belgium. He's in Israel. He's going to Canada. Then what happened?
And as I was in Belgium, I arrived in Belgium early and I had time before classes started. So I decided to do a little bit of tourism. And I went to Switzerland for where a Brazilian friend of mine who lived in Belgium was having a meeting, an engineering meeting. So I went with him to get to visit Switzerland. That was great. And I took a tour of one of the snowy peaks there to see snow for the first time. And I sat next to another girl my age, and we talked, and she was from Canada. And I said, you're from Canada, from Scarborough. And Moisés was already in Canada at that time, in Toronto. He needs a friend. He really does. So I gave her Moisés' address. And I said, I wrote a letter to Moisés because I had stopped communicating with him after he said that he was going to stay in Israel. And so she actually did deliver the letter. She did meet him and delivered the letter, had some coffee together and stuff. And so that's how he found out where I was, because he didn't know that before. I didn't tell him that I was going to Belgium because I was mad at him. I thought he was supposed to be in Toronto much sooner than he did. So we separated. I went one way, he went the other way, and
you were mad at him?
Yeah, it was because we had kind of made plans. We wanted to pretend that it was going to be possible to be together again, And I said, well, it's better that you go first and see how things are, how you like Canada, and then we'll see what happens. I might go, I might not go. If you want me to go, everything stayed open like that. So I had to to take my courses in Belgium for 1 year. And in the meantime, we started writing to each other, Moisés and I. And he started insisting that I visit him in Toronto as soon as possible. I said, as soon as possible. I just got here and I only have a vacation next year in June. Oh, of course he wasn't happy with that. He wanted me to drop everything and go see him after. It's like, I don't know. So I did all my exams and stuff, and then I said, okay, if you want to pay for my ticket, I'll go visit you in Toronto. So he did. So he did. So I had finished all my courses. I just had to write a memoir, a paper, at the end of the course. So when I got to Toronto, he was all happy to see me and stuff like that, and introduced me to his Brazilian friends, to his Canadian friends. And Toronto is beautiful. I mean, and it was summer, so I didn't know how awful the winter was going to be. But so when we saw each other, we decided that we wanted to give it a try again, But in order to give it a try, I needed a visa, because I only had 90 days to stay there for vacation. And so that's the only way for me to stay there and give it a try was to get married. There was no other solution for that. That's why we got married. I mean, we weren't sure, believe me. We were not sure about that. I'll never forget the day we got married when we had borrowed a friend's car to go to to City Hall to get married. It was hot, hot, hot as hell. August 8th, 1977. That's the day we went to City Hall to get married so I could stay longer in Canada and decide what to do with the rest of my life. And we borrowed a very, very nice car, red car, from David, our friend who was not going to be present at the wedding, but he was out of town, but he left the car. And then, so we parked the car on Lansdowne Avenue. Was Lansdowne? I think it is. I'm not sure that the name of the street, but and when we get there the next day in the morning, getting ready to go to City Hall, the car was nowhere to be found. We looked at each other and said, "What happened to the car?" We know we left it right here at the corner of our street, Laxton Avenue. The car was nowhere to be found. We found out that was a day when you were not allowed to park your car over there. So the car had been taken to the pound, was been hitched. And it was our wedding day. I mean, we almost were late for our own wedding. Well, we had to get a cab to go get married because it was going to take too long. So we got a taxi and got a taxi cab to go to City Hall. So we went to City Hall. Before that, we had a lasagna lunch. And we promised Moisés, because we were so unsure of what we were doing, that we promised each other that if we ever had to divorce, that we were not going to torture each other. We were going to cooperate. And we promised that. And he broke that promise, unfortunately. So present at our wedding were two friends of David's, the car owner and our best friend, who couldn't go there, but he sent his representatives, his ambassadors, and who brought flowers and wine and attended our celebration. Thank you so much, David. And then after that, we had to go get the car. The pound. All right. Fun times at Laxton Avenue. So I ended up staying in Toronto. So from then on, I had to think about what I would do with my life in Toronto until he was finished, because he still had 2 years to go to finish his residency in anesthesia. So I went to visit the University of Toronto. And they said that they would accept my coursework from Belgium if I wanted to do a master's degree in psychology or special education. So I said, okay, I'll do that. So I signed up for the master's degree at the University of Toronto in special education. And started in 77. And in 78, I found out that I got pregnant. That was not in the plan. It was not in the plan at all. That was that was hard. That was hard. So my first son, Andre, was born in January 1979. I was in the middle of my master's degree. The girls in my class said, "Are you out of your mind?" I said, "Why are you having the baby?" I said, "What?" I mean, I didn't even think of not doing it. Didn't even think of it. It didn't cross my mind. And so it was the hardest 6 months of my life, no doubt about it. After Andre was born, and my mother came to help us out. That was so nice of her. The first time she ever left Brazil. So that was in 77 when my mother came to Toronto for the first time to visit us and visit her first grandchild and babysit for him while I went to class. And Andre, all he did was cry and cry and cry. Yes, Andre Cardoso Mandel was a very colicky baby and had ear infections one after the other. He was always sick. He was the tiniest baby, he was 6 pounds 3. It was skin and bone, very tiny. But he survived. And we did too, barely. That was very hard. But at that time, I mean, Moises, it was the end of his program. So we moved to the States in July 79, like 6 months after Andre was born. And the only place that Moises found work here in the United States was Portsmouth, Ohio. Tiny little town, 30,000 inhabitants, and not one Brazilian in sight, and not one university, and not much to do of anything. That was tough. That was very tough to move from Toronto to Portsmouth. So the reason we had to move to Portsmouth specifically was that Moises, after having tried to pass the boards, the anesthesia board exam in the United States, he found out that he needed one more year of training because the rules were different in Canada and in the United States. There was a new rule in the United States that he was required to do a year of just plain medicine, just basic medicine, which he hadn't done in Toronto because it wasn't required. That took our lives back 2 years because that's why he had to go to the first place that had him the ability to both work as a physician, but at the same time, give him this extra year of just plain basic medicine that he was still due. And that was such bad news. He was so upset. It was not good at all. So everybody was in bad mood because nobody wanted to be in Portsmouth, Ohio, especially for that reason. The reason Moises didn't stay in Canada was because from the very beginning, he applied to go to the United States. He didn't apply for a visa in Canada. He applied for a visa in the United States because the states were searching for more anesthesiologists. And so the door was open in the States, and his older brother, already lived there. So he wanted to be closer to his brother. Miserable. I have a journal. When I was in Portsmouth, I wrote on a journal. I'm almost suicidal because I had to stay with Andre all day long. Moisés had to go to work. And of course, he was happy with the money he was making because it was already like, doctor's salary. And so we had a nice house and we had a nice car, and which we never had in Toronto. And so money wise, it was good. But I had to finish I had homework to do, actually, which was to finish my course paper for University of Toronto. So I did have work to do, so that's why I had to get a babysitter sometimes for Andre. Otherwise, I was with Andre all day long. All we did was just to go to the YMCA to exercise a little bit and for him to play with the kids there a little bit and play. I mean, he was 6 months old. That was not, but they had a nice little daycare for him while I exercised, at least, did something good and tried to lose weight. What else did I do? I took a class in a little community college there. I don't even remember what kind of a class because I have to go to school always. It's another person like that. So the truth is, we were just in Portsmouth, Ohio. I was like finishing my master's degree and just counting time until we could go, Moisés could get his board exam done. And that would take 2 years. So we stayed 2 years in Portsmouth, Ohio. And then Moisés found out that he needed this year of basic medicine, and he couldn't do it in Portsmouth, Ohio. So he had to find another place to go to, which ended up being Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The only advantage of Johnstown, Pennsylvania over Portsmouth, Ohio was that it was close to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is a very decent place, which I love because it was the best place I ever lived in the United States. And I do not complain. I'm happy here. There are like 5 or 6 universities, 2 of them high level, where I went back to school again and was happy as I am. Yeah, but so 2 years in Portsmouth, Ohio, 2 years in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. By then, it was already 1983 when we left Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and went back to Brazil. Because that was the plan from the beginning. Our plan was not to stay in the United States forever. At least my plan was not. Moisés, it ended up being his plan. But no, I wanted to go back to Brazil and be close to my mother because, my father had passed away in 1975 and she was, in Rio. I mean, my brother was there, but he was married and she was alone, so I was worried about her. But we went there to visit every year, at least, while she was there. And we did what we could do, but there was a lot of arguments. Should we go back to Brazil? Should we not? It was a huge decision. It was tough. Those were hard times at the beginning. It was hard. So in 83, Moisés took a 3-month temporary job in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at the Allegheny General Hospital, because he was replacing somebody who was a sick leave or something, just a temporary job. And he made a little bit of money to get us started in Brazil, And all I did was pack during the 3 months that we were in Pittsburgh. Pack books, pack clothes, we packed the whole house and send it via the post office. I went to the post office almost every single day. Thank goodness it was right there next to the building where we were renting. And I loved Pittsburgh because being there, and there was a lot of Brazilian friends that we had made already in Pittsburgh. Starting with the doctors a doctor that Moisés knew, a Jewish doctor, Leonardo, and he's still here. And so it was great to go to Pittsburgh. It was kind of fun. And Moisés packed a whole semi truck to carry the move from Pittsburgh to New York City, to put it on the cargo plane to send our move to Brazil. So that was in November 1983. In January 1984 was Andre's fourth birthday, and it was in Brazil. And the whole two families attended Andre's fourth birthday party. There were like over 100 people, definitely, because both my family and his family are large, and friends, yeah. It was amazing, but Andre was so scared. All those people that he never knew, grabbing his cheeks, and kissing him, and he wanted to hide under my skirt on the fourth day. The only thing that was good was that it was at a park, so he had toys and stuff to play outside. It was so hot. It was so hot. It was in January. January is summer in Brazil. But we have the movie of that birthday, and I'm glad we do. It was unforgettable, that birthday party. So then Brazil, we stayed at my mother's house for until we got an apartment close to her. We rented an apartment, and Moisés went to look for a job. The reason we went back to Brazil was because Moisés thought he was going to work doing anesthesia for a very busy obstetrician gynecologist in Brazil, in Rio. And so he was sure that he was going to have work. That's the only reason we went back, because he wouldn't not go back with nothing, But unfortunately, the first day we got there, he called this doctor and got the news that the other anesthesiologist who worked for him, whom had worked with Moisés as his mentor when he was in anesthesia school, he declared that he would not work for him anymore if Moisés was going to be part of the team. He had not told him. I mean, the obstetrician had not told his other anesthesiologist that Moisés was coming with enough notice, But they were not going to do the same work. Moisés was going to do the obstetrics part. He did the other part, So there was plenty of work for the both of them, but it was a betrayal, really, to be honest with you. It just ruined all the plans. If without that, it was going to be very hard to be able to make ends meet and find a job in Brazil, in Rio. So the next step was to look for a job, me and Moisés. And he actually went to meet one of the doctors who used to live in Toronto, when we lived in the same neighborhood, Brazilian too. He was an oncologist and worked at the cancer hospital in Rio, and he was able to get Moisés a job at the hospital there. So that's what saved us for a few months, you know. And I got a job back where I used to work at that child welfare foundation, where I didn't like to work because there was hardly any work to do, nothing meaningful. You know, it was like people trying to fake, pretend that they were working. I mean, it was just, we didn't help anybody, you know, in that place. It was a terrible place. But anyways, long story. So I started teaching English because just to make money, you know, and it was easy to get a job teaching English. The problem is I had to teach at night because I had another job during the day, and I was afraid of coming back home at night and walking the street that I had to walk to get to my apartment, you know. So the security, the problems with crime and stuff were terrible already back then. So after a few months, we started, you know, concluding that we were not going to be able to stay there because the problem was we had to help my mother too, you know, financially, because what he made, you know, with her pension was not enough to live, you know. And my brother was always got a job and then stayed 1 year and then was lost the job. You know, it was very insecure and never nothing worked for him. Till this day I don't know why not, honestly. But he used to get he would get the jobs and then suddenly he doesn't have the job anymore. It didn't work and then he got fired. So it was a nightmare again. But so we decided that, I mean, Moisés decided he was going to call Pittsburgh because he knew the chief of anesthesia at the University of Pittsburgh at McGee Hospital. And he called him directly and said, listen, this is the situation. I was promised a position that was not to happen here, and now I have no place to go. Do you have anything for me there? If I look, you can come anytime you want. This man saved my whole family's life, not just our life, not the two of us, my mother's life too, because she wouldn't have a place to drop dead if it wasn't for that. So I said, from then on, I will never complain about not being in Brazil again, because that was the problem. So we stayed in Brazil from November 83 until 9 months. It was just 9 months. We didn't even had an anniversary there in Rio again. We left. We didn't even say goodbye to the family because we just destroyed it. I mean, I was completely, because I knew we would never go back, you know. And my mother, just, it was a disaster, a disaster. Ooh. We came back with like two. So when we left Brazil, we had 2 suitcases each. We had brought like a full container of cargo, and we gave away everything we had and started from scratch again. It's wow. Nothing like starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Start over. Yeah. So, you know, it was security. It was peace of mind. Now, Andrea was 4 years old. He didn't cry a lot. He could sleep all night, and, you know, and yeah. Didn't have any well, actually, he still has ear problems until this day, but not as bad as it was before. So it was very good. Pittsburgh, I never dreamed I was going to live in Pittsburgh. That was a dream of my life, was to live in Pittsburgh. 5 universities. I mean, that's all I want. Just give me a university. I don't need beach. I don't need soccer. I just need university and some music, but
Yeah.
the two go together. So, and then I found things to do and had another baby because then after 4 years, I could think of that because I didn't want Andre to be all by himself. I wanted Andre to have at least one brother or sister, at least a sibling. It's sad not to have it because we had left all our families in Brazil. So Eric was the easiest baby in the world, as opposed to Andre, who was a very, very, very difficult and crying baby.
How did the two of them get along?
Well, yeah. I mean, Eric, of course, was 7 years younger than Andre. So Andre was definitely the old brother, right? Older brother. So Andre played with him, but of course it was a little hard. It was like two only sons because Andre was already in school and Eric stayed home, with me. And so they loved each other, but sometimes as a baby was great, but then once Eric started to walking and getting into everything, including Andre's toys and stuff like that, that things started getting a little agitated, because it was very different from Andre being the only son. Yeah, so there were some conflicts as expected. So Toledo was a very calm and it was good to live there. It was yeah, we took the time to be a family again, and I was home all the time. I wasn't trying to do something else, so there was no conflict. Everything went smoothly in Toledo, except for Moises at work, because after a few years, he started having conflicts with some of his partners there at the hospital. And he started showing some of his difficult temperament and have conflicts with some of the surgeons and with some of the nurses. He didn't think they were doing the right things and they could do better. And that he didn't keep his opinions to himself. So basically, he burned out after 5 years and wanted to go back to Pittsburgh again. And that to me was the best thing that could happen, because Pittsburgh was the best place where I ever lived in the United States, because the other towns were Portsmouth, Ohio was the first one, had 30,000, inhabitants, and very, very tiny, nothing to do. It was a very tiny place to live. There were no Brazilians there. I didn't know anybody. And so it was very limited. And so the 2 years we spent in Portsmouth, Ohio were very tough. And then when we came back to the States, living in Pittsburgh and in Toledo were not bad at all. But Pittsburgh was my dream because it had 4 universities, and I need to be close to a university. My career is to study. It's I always loved to study. And I had to find a university. And when he said that he had a job in Pittsburgh, I had no complaints. I was just fine with that because we already had a lot of friends in Pittsburgh from the time that we lived there, before we went to Brazil. So that was very good. So the 4 of us moved to Pittsburgh in 1991. And Moses accepted a position as an anesthesiologist at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center in Pittsburgh. And he had worked there for a couple of years before. and he knew the chief of anesthesia, and he accepted the job there again. So we rented the house for a year because we couldn't find a house to buy that we could afford, because Pittsburgh was much more expensive than Toledo. Toledo housing was very, very neat. We bought a big house for $150,000. So it's amazing and very comfortable. But then we found something finally, and we're still here. So I one day I decided to count how many addresses I've had in my life, and that was very interesting. And I'm looking at this list right now, and so far I have lived in 17 addresses all over the world since I was born. 17 addresses is a lot. It's a lot. But and the funny part is, until I was 26, I was in 2 addresses only. It was after 26 that I left Brazil that the nomad life started. But it finally stopped in 1991 when we came back to Pittsburgh and finally stayed here. Well, Moses is Moses is Moses, and so his temperament, it was the same explosive ups and downs, So already in Toledo, my mother came twice to visit us in Toledo, and she was scared to death of Moises, because we never knew. One day he would be perfectly fine and very kind. And when he was, the days when he was well, he would treat my mother like he likes her. He liked her very much. He said that he couldn't have a better mother-in-law, So his complaints were about his wife, not his mother-in-law. But anyway, so there were a lot of arguments and ups and downs. It's just that unpredictable and very depressive some days, because always complaining about work and things were not good, and never happy. He didn't want to go anywhere. He stayed home. I would go out because we knew a lot of people in Pittsburgh. I have a lot of friends here. He liked to have parties at home. He liked to have people come to the house. That he liked a lot. But he just got tired of, he didn't like to travel. After my mother passed away in 2000, before that, we used to go to Brazil almost every year for her to see the children. But after she died, and then his mother moved in with us because she had Alzheimer's. So Moises' mother came from Rio to live with us in 2001, I believe. Yeah. And she stayed for 5 years. So then he didn't travel anymore after that, since she came, because there had to be somebody at home. And and then his mother passed away, and I guess the depression got worse and worse, and the bipolar situation got worse. And I decided that this was the time, since Eric was already 5 years old and went to kindergarten, then the time for me to restart my career, had arrived finally. I had waited long enough. And I was really excited to be in Pittsburgh because of that, because the university, since Moises worked at the university, I had 3 courses for free, the tuition-free courses, because I was married to, for the family, So the University of Pittsburgh paid tuition, half of the tuition, part-time courses for me to go to school. And for Andrea too, he got tuition benefits. So that was the other extremely important thing about living in Pittsburgh. And I finally found something that I wanted to study to like start my professional life over again. So I decided to go to library school to get a master's degree in library sciences and become a librarian, which I wish I had thought of before, but it was okay too, because in 1993, 94, that was when the World Wide Web started to happen, and I was able to take courses on technology courses and be, updated with to be introduced to that life, which my sons were already into and my husband, but I wasn't, So I said, I have to go and find a field that is related to technology. And that was also, I was so happy to do that. That was a perfect choice. And everywhere I went in my life, I always volunteered at libraries. Like at my school, my psychology school in Rio, I was a volunteer at the no, actually I got paid to work at the library. When I went to Belgium, I got paid to work at the library there too. When I went to only at Toronto, I wasn't, because I didn't have time because I had a baby, but otherwise I lived in the library. I always loved libraries and I had never thought of studying library science. But when I went to volunteer at Eric's school, at the library, of course. So libraries had been my life all the way through. I just never thought of having a career there because nobody I knew was a librarian. But it was inside of me. I just didn't recognize it. So when I looked at the list of courses, everything was about technology. I said, okay, this is what I want to do now. This is exactly what I've been looking for forever. That's how it started. It was Eric's librarian who, after seeing me every week for a few months, she said, Leila, most librarians I know are going to retire because they've been working for 30 years, since 1968. And that was 1994. And it's going to be a problem for libraries. So this is the time I think you would be wonderful to go to library school, and then you can teach, you can learn all about the technology and the computers that you are so interested in. So it was, she is the one who was my mentor, Eric's school librarian. Yes. And what I ended up doing is teaching students at the community college how to study, how to do research, how to find information, how to tell good information from bad information on the internet, which is an absolute disaster still right now, So it's everything that couldn't have been a more perfect place for me. And I got part-time jobs immediately as soon as I graduated. And then later on, after I got experience, because my greatest problem was that I was not familiar with the books that the kids in school here were very familiar with. But there was a course on children's literature. There was another course on young adults literature that filled the blanks in my background, because I never went to a primary school or a high school in the United States. I didn't know the system. So that's why I never went to work at a public school, because I could not do it. I didn't know that teachers had to take care of, bus schedules and lunch money. And the extras. That was a mystery to me. I didn't know anything about that. But the community college, that was the perfect place for me to be. Perfect. So that's where I ended up, and I worked for 20 years until I was 64. So perfection, I couldn't. It's just unbelievable. I've been extremely fortunate throughout my life. It hasn't been perfect, but I can't complain, even though with all the problems I had in my life. As far as the careers go, and professional, I ended up where I always wanted to go, but never thought of going, except if it wasn't for my mentor, my librarian mentor. I'll finish with the following. Okay, I mean, I think so. This was a very interesting experience for me too, and I'm so glad that I am doing this with the help of David. But because I had a very stable and basic life until I was 26. And after that, after I met my husband, my life exploded. And then now that I have time to organize my history, I wanted to do that for my sons. They don't have kids yet. I don't know if they will, but if they do that before after I die, I want to have something in writing for them. So thank you, David. That's it.
That's it.
Right. There's a lot of important things that I couldn't say, but